Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bridges Conversations. My name is Steve Givens. I am the Executive Director of the Bridges Foundation. We are here in St. Louis and we offer an experience of the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola in everyday life. It's a 9-month program, begins in September and goes through May. And we are currently actually having a series of information sessions around town for those who might be interested in doing that, including one this evening at St. Louis University High School, which is one of our sites. So if you're interested in that and don't know about us already, please check us out at bridgesfoundation.org. There's information there about the retreat and the dates of all the upcoming information sessions. So, welcome again. And today we are with our long friend of the Bridges community, Paul Coutinho. Paul, for those of you who know him or don't, is an internationally recognized Ignatian scholar. He's an author, speaker, retreat master, and he brings a distinctive Eastern flavor to Western spirituality and to Ignatian spirituality. He's a native of India, and he frequently travels and leads retreats. He gives spiritual direction, trains people to become prayer companions, spiritual directors. He's the author of a number of books that are real favorites of mine, including How Big Is Your God? Ignatian Pathways, which is a book that I think many of us credit with maybe beginning our journey in Ignatian spirituality. And Just As You Are, another great volume. He holds master's degrees in both clinical psychology and religious studies, and has a doctorate in historical theology from St. Louis University, where he specialized in Ignatian spirituality. He's still an adjunct faculty member at St. Louis University, and he lives right here in St. Louis. So, Paul, welcome.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. It's really good to see you again. I'm going to begin, as we always do, by just asking you to give us a little bit of background about yourself, your family of origin, your place of origin, and how Ignatian spirituality first came into your life. How do all those things come together?
Well, I think most of you probably know my story already. I've talked about it many times. So, I grew up in a very Catholic family and in a very Catholic ghetto, and so I have all the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Catholic tradition. That's how I began. But somehow, my God was always a God that would not keep me in one place, but keep me on, journeying both through my personal life and especially through my spiritual life. So I had two wonderful parents. My father, you know, he gave me the gift of questioning. Of course, he was taught by the Jesuits. His father was taught by studied under the Jesuits. So that kind of questioning mind, probably he inherited either from the Jesuits or it was just his own personal, way of life.
Mm.
And my mother, her gift to me was the gift of infinite possibilities. So for her, nothing was impossible. So she never stopped trying, and all kinds of different things, even though, they might go against culture, religion, traditions. So those were like my special gifts that I was blessed with, my parents. Now, when I was in the eighth grade, we moved from a very Catholic environment into a place where we were just four Christian families among 200 other families. Most of them were Hindus, but on our, we had apartments. My neighbors were We had a Muslim on one side, a Hindu on the other side, a Jewish family, a Zoroastrian family. So we had all these different. So it was a great exposure to not only to culture but also to religion. So looking at all these different people and the way they lived their religious beliefs and lived their lives made me question my own Catholic upbringing. Now, it did not make me less Catholic, but it gave me an opportunity to understand, my Christianity in a better way, and also to give it a better expression, a more meaningful expression in my life. But of course, this was before Vatican II, so questioning, especially things that were like dogma and something that you never question, that was a challenge. But I had my father as a role model and my mother as another role model that helped me move along. What about my introduction to, Ignatius and Ignatian spirituality? I studied, I went to the same school that my grandfather and my father went to, and that was a Jesuit school. So there I was introduced to more to Francis Xavier than St. Ignatius. And so the spirit of Xavier is something that really motivated me and drove me in my personal life. So I was passionate about, doing good, spreading good, doing all those kinds of things. But then I joined the Jesuits. And in the novitiate already, the more I learned about St. Ignatius, the less I liked Francis Xavier, and the way he lived out his spirituality. So it was kind of almost like day and night, and almost, opposite of what like Ignatian spirituality was all about. I mean,
can you say a little bit more about that? What was it about Xavier that changed your mind on that?
Xavier was more of a doing person, one that really wanted to, baptize people without really converting anybody. And Ignatius, so that was some of the things. And also, as the superior, and at that time, he almost got the Inquisition to come to Goa and to India. And Ignatius saw what he was doing and sent him a letter to say, please come back to Rome. Part of what he wanted him to do was also to get away from what he was doing. But the other part was also maybe, his zeal could be a little infectious. And so he could train younger people, at least tell them about, and maybe it was, Ignatius's second chance of getting him in line. But unfortunately, the letter reached Xavier after he had died already. So we were left with, so anyway, coming to the novitiate, my novice director, really was like passionate about Ignatius. So he gave me my first kind of, my interest, and he got me curious and enthusiastic about Ignatian spirituality. However, what I realized about my novice director, which I feel really sad, he was very proficient in languages. I mean, he was a perfectionist. So when he spoke Spanish, it was perfect Spanish, perfect French, perfect German, perfect Italian, perfect English. So he knew many languages. The painful thing is, he did not use his languages as a scholar. He just repeated. There is a joke I tell sometimes. This priest who was, after Sunday Mass, one of the old men came to him and he came with his wife and said, Father, your homilies are boring. You're hopeless. And the wife, to save the situation, said, "Oh, please don't listen to him, Father. He's just repeating what everybody else is saying." You know, but that is what I felt is what happened to my novice director. And when I came to St. Louis, all those so-called Ignatian scholars were just repeating what everybody else was saying, except one Jesuit. He didn't have a doctorate, and he was Marty Palmer. Marty Palmer was, little known, Jesuit, but for me, he was truly an Ignatian scholar. He knew languages, and he used his language to, for a critical study of the Ignatian texts. The other Jesuit that had a real impact on me was a Jesuit in India. When I was a scholastic during my regency, I was already very into Ignatian writings and studies, and he had read all the original writings of Ignatius, all the volumes, several times, as a novice and during his journey. And he knew, passages, etc. So he would come to me, and he would come into my room, sit on my table, and talk about Ignatian spirituality till the sun went down, and he was still talking. So he gave me a real love for the sources, to go back to the sources of Ignatian spirituality. So when I had a year in Rome, that was my gift, that was given to me, and a gift to myself, where I had a chance to go through to the sources, the original text of Ignatius. And so that is and so therefore I have a little, I do feel, there is something like I would call Ignatian spirituality and Jesuit spirituality, and the two are not the same. Mm. And the reason why there's a difference is because Ignatius is not very Catholic in his theology. Ignatius was a mystic. And if you want to know that his theology was not very Catholic, he was caught by the Inquisition several times, not because, they wanted to have, maybe have a glass of wine or share a steak with him, but they had problems with his doctrine. And Ignatius got away with the Inquisition, not because he was right, but because he was well connected. So what has happened with the Jesuits is, they are honestly trying hard to make Ignatius Catholic in his theology and in doing so, they have diminished and I would say even kind of, destroyed Ignatian spirituality and Ignatian mysticism.
Let's shift a little bit to your new book. So your new book is called Awaken to the Divine, 52 Contemplative Reflections to Transform Your Spirit. And as part of this, you were talking about your upbringing, in India. Was there, how is it that you came to, it makes total sense, but can you talk a little bit about this coming together of your upbringing in the East and Western, traditional Western Catholicism, Christian spirituality? How do those two things come together for you? And when did that begin to happen, and how does that all come together?
That's a great question. So I told you, so we were baptized by the Jesuits about 500 years ago or more, but they were so much in a hurry to baptize people that they forgot to convert us. So basically what happened was we had the baptism, and then we had, given doctrine, catechism, etc. But they did not take away, 5,000 years of spiritual tradition. So in the novitiate, we were still following, the Catholic, traditional Roman Catholic doctrine. But when I finished the 2 years of novitiate, In my third year and my fourth year that I lived in the same house, Anthony DeMello was my superior. So, kind of encouraged by him, another companion and I, we went and told him we would like to go and pray, our evening prayer in the Hindu temple. So for 2 years, we went there to the Hindu temple to pray, and then we brought their prayers, their way of praying, into the Jesuit community, and that spread through the Indian church. That was after Vatican II. Of course, now all that is gone. But so that was my kind of beginning of, so the Indian tradition and the West. So all my training, by the way, when we were baptized, again, they made us foreigners in our own land, in our own culture. So we were kind of, the colonial group of people, Christians, among Hindus. So we were taught to despise them. And so we were given, all our education was Western. All my, my religious formation was also Western. We studied philosophy and theology, and but somehow, again, I don't know. So I did my maybe Jesuit formation or my priestly formation as in the Western tradition, but all my other secular degrees were in non-Christian institutions. And so that gave me an exposure and to other cultures. In fact, when I did my college, I took Sanskrit as one of my languages, and through Sanskrit, I got a deeper appreciation of my Indian culture, and which I've never lost. And so therefore there was, a kind of a combination of an Eastern spirituality is more a mystical spirituality. There is no really theology or dogma, but it's a way of life. It's a way of living. And so therefore, when I look at Ignatius is not dogma, is not theology, but it's a way of living the mystical life. And so for me, it was easy to combine, to see a kind of a link between Eastern spirituality and mysticism and Ignatius. And I think that is one of the blocks, again, of Jesuit spiritualities, because they're very rational, they're very logical, they're very, following, again, tradition, and they would find it difficult to move to an Eastern, way of looking at spirituality in life.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw some of your own words back at you here, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this. But in your new book, you talk about the importance of deepening our understanding of the divine presence. So
Right.
how do those two things play together, or how do we work toward that? How do we work toward deepening what it really means to have that understanding of a divine presence?
So in my introduction to that, to my new book, Awaken to the Divine, I talk about different methodologies, to be able to experience the, the divine presence and to make that kind of a way of life. And so I give a Benedictine method, an Ignatian method, an Eastern method. But, if you forget about all those methods, there are those 3 words that I use, or the 3 steps that are very significant and important to be able to try to understand, divine consciousness and divine presence. And those 3 words are, first, to understand, second, to believe, and third, to know. So, for example, let's take, I'm made in the image and likeness of God, or I'm the divine breath, or I'm a child of God. Now, I can understand that. And to understand, maybe I need to read all the books. I need to read all the commentaries. I need to really, really, really understand. So go through all of those things and understand. And once you understand, the next step is, yeah, now I believe. that I'm the image and likeness of God, that I'm the divine breath. But until you know, and knowing is kind of an intimate experience at the core of our being.
Mm.
And if you look at Ignatius's experiences, he says he understood very little, but he knew. And once he knew, he would say, even if the scriptures were not written, I would be willing to die for what I experience, which means what I know.
Mm.
And the question some people will ask is this, like, how do I know when I know? And I said, you may not, but everybody else will know that you know, because they see something different in you. They experience the different energy, a different person. There's something that has happened that has changed.
Yeah.
So just a little, like I'm just thinking about this. Carl Jung was once asked, do you believe in God? And he stopped and he says, do I believe in God? He says, no, I don't believe in God because I know God.
Mm.
And that man is phenomenal. I really have great admiration for him, but don't have the courage to do what he did. So, his experiences.
Yeah. We do have, let's see, we got another 5 or 10 minutes or so here. We have a good chunk of people online right now. If any of you have questions for Paul, please just drop them in the Facebook comment section, and I will see them, and we'll get to some of them if we can. Paul, let's talk a little bit more about your new book. You mentioned this already. In the book, you encourage a methodology of prayer that combines wisdom and practices from both Ignatian and Benedictine spirituality. I'm wondering if you could say a few words to say someone who's about to embark on something like going through the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius through the Bridges program. What kind of spirit of prayer and openness would you encourage them to bring to that? How do they take that experience and use it to, as we say earlier, deepen that understanding of the divine presence?
So here's what comes to my mind. I had attended a 10-day Buddhist retreat, Vipassana. And one of the things they'll tell you right in the beginning of that retreat is this: just abandon all your practices, your theologies, your piety, your spirituality, and if you have any, say the Eucharist for 10 days, just put that aside and give this method a chance. So you just follow the method. After the 10 days, you can go back to all that you've been doing, but for 10 days, give up everything that you were doing, and now, give this method a chance. And for me, it was a phenomenal experience, because at the end of the 10 days, they didn't want me to become, a Buddhist. They did not want me to give up being a Christian. But it gave me, it kind of, it almost, how to pull that, catapult me or launched me into, a place where Ignatius was without, what my previous experiences did not and could not do. So when you're talking about people who want to prepare for how do they prepare themselves for the spiritual exercises, I would say, first of all, they need to have the courage just to abandon all of that and come. But on the other hand, they need also to surrender to people who truly know the Ignatian exercises and are not giving Jesuit exercises. Now, that's a very tricky kind of, I have discouraged quite a few people from going through, the exercises when they told me, who was going to direct them and guide them. And I said, You may go through it, but here's like what you're going to have is a Jesuit experience, not an Ignatian experience. So part of what I have done is I will not give the spiritual exercises to anyone that I have not personally prepared. And the way I prepare them is to go through the text of the exercises, every number, step by step, to dissect it and to be able to understand it so that once you begin the exercises, then you just flow through because you already have you've already had the preparation.
Mm-hmm.
But without the preparation, if you're trying to do it, it's a mess. If you can follow what I'm saying, you're trying to, so that's what I would say, and again, the spiritual exercises of Ignatius, I'm still a student, I just discover something new even now, and I'm just so excited.
Yeah, I think, even when we meet with people who are coming into doing the exercises with us, while we have these people who are trained prayer companions, we're very emphatic in saying that we don't come to this as the experts who are going to tell you what to believe, but we are going to hopefully lead you gently into this encounter with a very Ignatian Jesus, and
okay, let me stop you there because I have a reaction there.
Please.
The exercises are not about Jesus. The exercises are about the divine essence. So Ignatius has very little use for Jesus as the humanity of Jesus. If you read his autobiography, he's talking about, he sees Jesus without any body, the human Jesus without any body parts. He's not a male, he's not a man, there's a person that is divine. And one of the things that, I've had problems with, some of the Western Ignatian scholars is that, again, I told you they're trying to save Ignatius from the Catholic Church or the Inquisition all over again. Because Ignatian spirituality is not Christocentric. Ignatian spirituality is theocentric, divine-centered, centered on the essence. Because, even if you're looking at, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, the shepherds, etc., what Ignatius wants you to do is to go beyond, to look at their heart and their spirit, how it is connected with the divine essence, and don't get lost with this person, the form of this person, because that becomes an obstacle. So, because here I've had tremendous disagreement with some of the scholars that want to make him so Christocentric. I have given Ignatian spirituality or taught Ignatian spirituality to Hindus, to Buddhists, to Muslims, to atheists, to agnostics, and none of them had any problem in understanding, accepting, and following Ignatian spirituality. But as soon as you make him Christocentric, you've ruined Ignatius.
All right. Well, that sounds like something we could spend a whole lot more time on, but we don't have that time today. I want to end with one little more question, if you have the time. No one's asked any questions yet, although we have quite a few people online. But you write in your book that about, okay, we do this work, we try to go deeper, we try to understand this divine presence, but in the end, it's not just about understanding that, but about becoming a contemplative in action, about fully being involved in life. So how do we go from a deep understanding and experience of prayer to bringing that into our lives?
So let me use the example of Jesus. Okay. At the beginning of his life, who was what was Jesus' relationship with God? He was following the Jewish tradition. God was for him, was the great other, you know, and that was transcendent. And for him to experience God, he had to go through the temple. He had to follow the law. He had to observe, like, all the rituals, and that's where he was. And he was basically like, if you follow the traditions, his God was more the priestly God, or the God of Deuteronomy, or the Elohistic God, trying to be perfect, following that God. And then, so for him, breaking any one of those laws or commandments or those rituals would be an obstacle in his relationship with God. But then he has a baptism experience. And in his baptism experience, that God who was out there now becomes intimate, imminent, and he expressed that as Abba, Father. And now, once he has that experience, then law, theology, rituals become secondary. His absolute is his baptism experience. And then you find him, breaking the Sabbath, breaking the social laws, breaking all these other, not because he enjoyed doing it, but because of his relationship with God, he was transformed. And then Jesus doesn't go, if you read the Gospels, he doesn't go to the temple to pray. He goes to a lonely place. He goes to the mountain. He's like, and he's praying when he's among the people. So he's praying right there and then, where there is a need, there Jesus, raises himself with the people in prayer. But otherwise, he's not in a temple. He's going to all these different places. But Jesus's relationship with God does not stop with his Abba experience at the baptism. If you read John chapter 4, Jesus is now talking about God, who is spirit and who is truth. And he tells the Samaritan woman that God is not worshipped in the temple or the holy mountain, but God is spirit, God is truth. God is like the wind. You don't know where it comes from, you don't know where it goes, but we're just basking and, being in God. And so therefore, how do we grow in our relationship with God? How do we follow Ignatius? How do we know? Like follow the heart and spirit of Jesus, and our relationship with God will also change. And here's the last thing that I will say, that I'm a little different from what I used to say about Ignatius. At the end of the spiritual exercises, Ignatius talks about, becoming one with the divine essence, like the rays of the sun and the sun, the waters of the fountain and the fountain. And I used to say, there are no rays without the sun, and the rays have the identity only as being part of the sun. Or the fountain, there is no fountain without water, and water has its identity only as being a part of the fountain. Therefore, there is no me unless I find my identity in the divine essence. But now I have changed. It's not me in the divine essence, but it's me becoming the divine essence. So it's like, the waves on the ocean. Say the waves are not the ocean are not the waves. No, the wave is the ocean. There are no waves, there is no ocean. There is no rays, there's no sun, there's only sun. There is no fountain, there is no water, there's only fountain. Therefore, there is no God, there is no me, there is only divine essence. And that's the way Ignatius lived at the end of his life.
Well, thank you, Paul. We're running up on time here. I would love to continue this for quite a while. Paul has a blog that he publishes on from time to time. He says he will maybe start doing that a little more often, but it's at paulcoutinho.wordpress.com. Paul does offer retreats. He just finished a summer retreat at the Mercy Center here in St. Louis. If you're interested in learning more about what he has coming up or any of his books, I'm sure you can reach Paul through this WordPress site. So do that. And I want to mention that our next episode of Bridges Conversation will be about a month from now on Thursday, August 11th at noon. And we'll be talking with Father Dan Daly, who has a book recently come out called Jesus and the Barbecued Fish Breakfast. And it's a look at the gospel stories through the lens of the spiritual exercises. So that's what we'll be doing in August. Paul, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your friendship to the Bridges community, and we hope to see you soon.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you all next time.